Hi, everyone. My name is Kismet Kairan. I am a neuroscience major at UC Berkeley, and today I will be talking to you all about how to successfully take away information from an academic journal and how to read an academic journal overall. So we can start with the presentation. So this is targeted towards high school students because everyone in high school or in any level of education really should understand how to take away from an academic paper. So first, let's go into what is an academic journal and how to use an academic journal. So first things first, an academic journal is a scientific research paper that has been peer-reviewed and published. It is written by experts on that field. So this thing called peer-reviewed is essentially when other experts on that field that did not write that paper, they are going to be looking at that paper time and time again to make sure that everything that has been published is accurate, that those people who wrote the paper, they are being honest as well. So it is because that scientific research papers are peer reviewed so many times that they are reliable sources of information as well. Because they have been checked again and again, we know that those researchers are being honest, at least in most of the time. So an academic journal has a purpose of communicating research findings to other researchers because it's essentially a way in the scientific community to share information. It can also point to future research trends. So for instance, with the topic of artificial intelligence, there has been a lot more interest in trying to find the intersection of that and just humans overall. So you'll see that a lot of academic journals being published now are starting to have an emphasis on that as well. With academic journals, you get an idea on the latest scientific research and you get the idea on what is coming up right now. So next is how to use academic journals. You want to use academic journals almost all the time, especially when you're writing any professional or academic paper on a topic. They're really helpful, again, when you need to write a research paper, when you want to understand a research experiment in its entirety as well, or if you just personally want to have a more technical understanding on a topic as well. The thing with academic journals is that the citations need to be accurate. You want to make sure that all the researchers who wrote the paper are properly receiving all of the credit for the effort that they have put in. So next, before we move on to question number 2, make sure to answer the question on the form, which is, what is the purpose of an academic journal and who is the audience of an academic journal? So next we have part 2, which is going into how to discuss an academic journal and how to take away each part of an academic journal. So first off, you want to think about how an academic journal is organized overall. So typically, an academic journal will be organized so that you have a hypothesis or an abstract. You will have a section that goes into how the research was conducted, which is called a methodology. And then next, you will have a section where they talk about all of the results that they have. So when reading an academic journal, I would recommend that you reflect on why the researchers chose to structure the paper in the way that they did. Why did they choose to talk about their hypothesis early on? Why did they choose to identify these terms? That's something that's really important to understanding what a researcher is trying to accomplish with their paper. Also, since replication is a very important part of scientific research overall, you typically in experiment have to replicate things over and over again to make sure that any hypothesis or any result that you have is an accurate statement in all situations and not just a one-off incident. So because replication is so important, the methodology section will be the largest part because that's when researchers go into how they accomplished what they did, how did they decide what procedures they followed. And next is about relevancy. So how relevant is an academic journal? Many scientific fields change very rapidly. So a paper from 2018 may already be outdated in 2023. So I would recommend looking to see, do the authors of that work have any more recent works? And typically they have more recent works on that topic. However, it's still really important to understand that older papers are still really useful, especially if they're foundational texts on a topic. So papers as old as even the 1800s can be really important to understand what did people think at that time? How did we come to the ideas that we have right now? Next, you have parts of an academic journal. You have the abstract, introduction, methodology, results, discussion, and then, of course, to end it off, you conclude. So with the abstract is typically 250 words or less. It includes purpose, a little bit about the history on the topic, an overview of the procedures done, of the results done, are the results significant, and an ending statement as well. Even in the abstract, you will find that the methodology is typically the largest section overall. And the abstract is just to give you a general idea on the paper. Then you have the intro, which is a more detailed version of the abstract. So for answers, you have why, what, how, and you should contain context and background information on the research topic. Then you have the methodology, which we've gone over before, but again, this is typically the largest scientific paper. It explains the actions taken to research the topic. It explains what were the procedures, what were the techniques used, why were these techniques used, and how was data collected overall. Again, this is really important for replication and for peer review as well. Then you have the results section, which is what did the researchers actually accomplish? This is written very objectively overall. There's no personal opinion or interpretation done. You will often find images as well in this section, and I would pay careful attention to these images as well. Then you have your discussion and you have your conclusion. So with the discussion, this is where the researchers actually offer up their interpretation, where they offer up their opinion that is their data significant or is it non-significant? It starts to address any limitations that the research may have, and it acknowledges whether their hypothesis was accurate or not. Then lastly, as a conclusion, it's not just a summary of everything. It instead interprets the findings to a higher level of abstraction. And what that means is that they try to see what are the implications of the research that they have done overall. And it goes over the challenges that people may have faced. So before we move on to part 3, how to research for an academic journal, make sure to answer the question on the Google form, which is what is the purpose of an abstract and what is the purpose of a conclusion? So this suggests where to research. So you want to pull from primary and secondary sources. Primary sources in the context of academic journals just means papers that researchers have actually published themselves, whereas a secondary source may be an overview of all the research done on a topic. So the researchers themselves aren't doing the experiment, but they're talking about experiments done by other people. You can also use research hubs, which we will talk about later on. And typically, I would look at the citations of articles and other academic journals just to get an idea of where do you want to research. Those academic journals, you have starter journals and you have advanced journals. The starter journals have less advanced terminology while still being reputable and very informative, whereas advanced journals have more advanced terminology and they tend to be more specific as well. So if you'll see the list there, it's typically just journals targeted at a particular area, whereas in the starter journals, those journals cover a wide range of. And then how to research. So you would want to use search hubs like Google Scholar and PubMed. You want to search for specific author, topics, or keywords. It's really important that you don't type in how does the prefrontal cortex relate to X. Instead, you want to type in prefrontal cortex and then the other keyword that you want, because then that'll look for all papers that have those 3 keywords. You can also search for an author's name alongside a topic, because that can help you identify what else has this author published in a particular area. How to research part 2. So you can use and, or an asterisk to help with your search. You can use and because that will give you results with multiple terms. If you use or, that will give you results with either term that you use. And then if you use an asterisk, that can help with your search, because if you're looking for a word such as farm and you have an asterisk in there, you will get results like farm, farming, farmers, and a lot more terms that are related to the original term that you typed in. So before we move on to part 4, just make sure to answer the question on the Google form, which is how do and, or, and an asterisk help you with your search? So going over some activities that you can do with other people. is you can have a debate with people on some topics that are hotly contested right now and are going to continue to be hotly contested in the next couple of years. So, for instance, you can argue which principle of bioethics is the most essential to you. What do you think is the most important one for people to think about? You can talk about save your siblings. Is having a save your sibling, is it ethical? Is having a younger sibling to do an organ donation to an older sibling with a life-threatening condition? Is it wrong or is it okay? You can have designer babies. Is there harm in creating designer babies? This can make people immune to certain types of um, illnesses. Then you can decode the brain. So if we understand what it means to be a human, is it right or is it wrong to replicate that in AI? These are all topics that you'll definitely talk about a lot more in the coming years. And next, we'll just read an academic journal together really fast. I'll just highlight what you should be paying attention to when reading an academic. So here we have an academic journal on lucid dreaming, and the abstract is highlighted in blue over there. So here I highlighted what is the key term. The key term is lucid dreaming. So I highlighted lucid dreaming. I highlighted their proposal, which is we propose that LD is associated with prediction of signals. And I also highlighted their ending sentence of their abstract because typically that'll kind of include why they're trying to accomplish what this paper is setting out to do. Then in purple, you have the introduction. You have one other key term, rapid eye movement. Again, you just want to highlight any terms that you come across. And so over here again, you can see why am I highlighting dreaming? It's a key term. I'm also highlighting, for example, that whole section there because that's starting to go into what are they trying to answer overall. So those are the type of things that I want to keep in mind as I'm reading the paper. And again, you want to highlight particular types of signposts or key terms. So for instance, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, so they're all key terms for me. I want to make sure to highlight that. In other words is another key term to highlight. It's highlighted in that pinkish orange. You want to highlight that because essentially when you have a term such as in other words, that'll sum up a huge chunk of text that you have, and it'll essentially talk about the implication of that as well. So again, you just want to highlight anything that's important to you. Again and again in this paper, they're talking about how the human brain is organized from top down or the other way around, from down up. And so I highlighted some sentences that go into what exactly that means because I know that's really important for understanding the paper overall. And here again, just want to highlight any sentences at the end and at the start because those typically give you an idea of what the paragraph is about overall. And again, I wanted to focus on the images because it's really important to understand the images used in an academic journal. A lot of times people overlook them, but how a scientist or a researcher chooses to represent their work in a visual way is essential to understanding what they're trying to accomplish. And then here in the pink, I highlighted some other key words like the insight of, importantly, and in other words as well. So here again, you have another keyword, which is hence. So hence is a really important keyword because that'll go into, you'll have a huge chunk of text or a huge type of paragraph, and then the last sentence will be hence. And that hence sentence will go into what the implication of all that is. Why is all of that research an important thing to understand? And you have another image here, which again, I highly recommend you need to understand a research paper overall. Again, I highlighted a key term, TPJ, that's really important. As mentioned above, that's important. They're reiterating what they have said before. If they're reiterating something, it means that you definitely want to pay attention to it. And if you have words such as in our framework, you learn more about what the researchers have done personally and what their personal opinion is on the topic as well. You also have just some other keywords such as although, which is important because that kind of goes into what challenges or what any limitations may be. And you also want to go into what are the associations that are starting to be made as well. You also have in pink highlighted as an intermediate summary, we propose, and you want to highlight those we propose sentences because that goes into what their hypothesis is or what their interpretation is. And here I would highly recommend highlighting any for example statements because with for example statements, you understand what they're trying to do. And examples can help you understand a concept overall. And then next, I highlighted in kind of the purple color, there we have the post statement again, and we also hypothesized and future studies are needed. This is when they talk about, again, their interpretation and the implication of what they have done. And then here, you really just want to look at what examples are they using. The first sentence and the last sentence typically tend to be the most important things to highlight. And here again, I'm highlighting those signposts, first postulate, fifth postulate, because that can help you when you're trying to look through a paper again for like your fourth, fifth time. What are you trying to find? I would also highlight signposts such as in our view or in our perspective, because that again lends to their interpretation of their research. Then at the end, as a conclusion, we propose 5 postulates. That's going back to their introduction, right? So that's really important to understand. And then again, you end your conclusion with future studies and so on. So when they end with the future studies, that means that they're looking forward to seeing what's going to happen in the field in the next couple of years, and that they're wondering what the implication of all this will be. I would also focus on the acknowledgement section as well. You want to make sure it's not funded by a particular company or organization. Rather, you want it to be funded by an institution because that's how you know that the research being done is as accurate as possible. And you also have the references here, but you don't need to pay too much attention to this unless you want to go into more detail on a specific topic. So that is the end of the presentation. That's all I have for you all today. Thank you so much for being here. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them on the Google Classroom forum. We look forward to seeing you at the next lesson.